Well, Brian Cuban, the younger brother of Dallas Mavericks owner and entrepreneur Mark Cuban, says trauma and shame are the gatekeepers to happiness. Through his own journey of overcoming addiction to alcohol, cocaine, and bulimia, he learned that lesson and is committed to helping others learn how to build resilience as he did in order to persevere in the face of life's challenges. In his first book, Shattered Image, he chronicled the 27 years of eating disorders and the impact of body dysmorphia on his mental health. In his second book, The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption, he took a look back at how addiction and other mental health issues destroyed his career as a once successful lawyer and how he redefined his life in recovery and ultimately found redemption. And now, through finding redemption and building resilience, he is a sought after speaker and best selling author with his first novel, The Ambulance Chaser, releasing as the #1 selling debut paperback thriller. And his next novel, a crime thriller called The Body Brokers, is set for release in December of 2024. And since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, Brian is here to talk about not only his road to recovery, but how he's used aspects of his story to become the successful entrepreneur he is today. I am so excited, John, to have Brian with us. We've been waiting for this for a while.
Good
As
to
am
see you
I.
again, Kim.
This is a pretty impressive guest that we have, and I'm really looking forward to learning his struggles and how he overcame them, and then parlayed that into a career as a novelist and speaker. And it's just fascinating. So, and it dovetails on all we've talked about this month regarding mental health, the other
Yep.
guests we've had on the shows.
Yep, definitely. And so, Brian, before we get started, I know I kind of hinted at it before going into this. We've talked quite a number of times. You've been very generous in your time, even donating some of your time to the Global PAD Association to help, talk to and help our patients build resilience. And so, since we have talked quite a few times, what is that one question that I've never asked you, that no one's ever asked you, that I don't know, maybe we shouldn't ask you?
Let me hear you sing.
And no,
I am a closet bad karaoke purveyor.
I love it. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Raindrops keep falling on my head,
I
just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed. Nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head. They keep falling.
I
Well
love it.
done.
That actually, woohoo! I wish we had some sort of clapping sound effect. Um,
But you know what the interesting thing is I really started to explore singing as a result of trauma in childhood.
really.
Uh, One of the things I talk about in my very first book, Shattered Image, was I was a heavy bullied kid and very shy. I went to the summer camp and decided to do a talent show with this kid who was very outgoing, and we decided to sing a Beatles song. And we get up on the stage, it's full of kids out there in the audience. He starts singing. I sit there frozen, and all that comes out is croak, croak. And I start crying, and the kids start laughing at me. I bolt off the stage, and I never sung another note. And it was kind of like falling off a horse, right? The trauma, you don't give it, you got to get back on the horse. I never did. And I decided I was going to address that childhood fear and get back on the horse and learn how to sing just for myself.
Oh, I love that. And it's interesting that you pick drops keep on, you know, because in the article that you wrote for our Mental Health Awareness Month journal, you talk about building resilience. And one way to build resilience was actually through getting in the shower and feeling and just visualizing the drops from the shower head, just washing away your concerns, your fears, your stress, and any trauma. And so I just wonder if there's any deeper meaning to you choosing that song.
Uh, sure. I mean, it is a song of resilience. It's a song of building resilience and not letting, the rainy days, keep you down too long and moving forward. So I purposely chose that song.
And
So
your ultimate singing career is going where?
Wherever it decides to go.
Oh, no, no, no. What's your
My
dream?
goal is just to be able to do passable karaoke.
Just passable karaoke. There's no grander ultimate place you'd like to sing?
No, not really, because what's funny about it is learning your own voice and getting comfortable with your own voice and how you sound. Learning how to sing is a long process, and you go on YouTube, you see the learn singing in 30 days and do this and do that. It is not that easy.
No.
It is not that easy. And one of the ways we build resilience is to test our limits, right? You test, you fail, you learn from it, and you move forward from that. The problem with like people go on YouTube and do these prepackaged things is you get comfortable doing the same thing over and over, and you get good with just one narrow strip of vocal exercise, and you never challenge yourself. And the only way to learn how to sing is to croak, is to crack, is to try for notes you can hit and build that way. And so it's like building resilience.
It's interesting. I have a funny story. I met Gordon Getty from the oil tycoon family, and he's a famous composer. And I was doing a story on him and his entrepreneurial empire out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I just thought it'd be really fun to just ask him for some tips on singing. I said, "Can you teach me to sing?" And he said, "Okay, just repeat after me." And he said, "La," and I was like, "La." And he said, "No, no, 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 no. La." And I was like, "La." I was constantly off key. And he's like, "Okay, I quit. What can you sing?" And I said, "Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you."
Yeah, but Kim, the interesting thing is that what I've learned is because I didn't think I could sing, and some people may still my self-deprecation. Some people may still think I can't, but if you can, if you are not tone deaf, right, and you can learn how to sing.
I think I'm tone deaf.
yeah, but see, how do you know if you're tone deaf or not? I mean, I
There are
think I
tests
know.
you can take.
I think Gordon Getty tested
Everyone
me.
thinks they're tone deaf because it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. I can't sing, so I must be tone deaf, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you just start from the beginning. You just
Yeah.
start with vocal exercises. You start figuring out what your early limitations are and start just building it. Singing is really building blocks, building blocks.
I think that's so true. And everyone does. And you have to find what's your register. And then once you find, it's like meeting people where they are and then guiding them where you want them to be,
I
right?
mean, I have a low voice, but I can hit some decent high notes. I can do C5, and I couldn't do that when I started. It just takes practice, dedication, and you just repetition.
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to see how Brian, or maybe hear how Brian is hitting those high notes and overcoming those life's challenges that can have an impact on your mental health. So stay with us. Okay.
This is where the guy goes clear.
Yeah.
Clear.
A boy.
Because this is going live on Saturday. So we're pre-recording it for Saturday's show, which is live on the radio in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so, John, you want to take us back on this one?
Yeah, because what I'd like to do, Brian, is we usually do a moment of inspiration. And so I take a quote that I like. And I found the quote from your dad in your book about today is as young as you will ever be. Live like it. Would you be opposed to me mentioning that and you commenting
No,
on
not at all.
why you chose
My
that for
dad
the
is
ambulance
my
chaser?
inspiration.
Excellent. Love it.
No, and yeah, our dad was just he ran an auto trim shop he was a middle child like me, and he ran an auto trim shop. Is what they do is they put on convertible seats, they reupholster seats, put on convertible tires. Very working class guy.
Cool. Well, we're ready. Josh, are you ready for the countdown?
I will
Okay.
start the clock as soon as he goes.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are honored to have Brian Cuban on as a guest, lawyer, author, and now karaoke singer. So Brian, I wanted to, we typically start a show with a moment of inspiration. And as I was looking for a quote to use today, I opened up your book, The Ambulance Chaser, and you have a quote from your dad. And the quote is, "Today is as young as you will ever be. Live like it." I love that quote because every day is a gift and you can't waste a second. But tell me, I imagine your dad was your inspiration, but tell me what this quote means to you and why you put it in the book.
What it means is that honestly, I don't, especially now I'm 63, you have to take every day and live it like it could be your last, right? Because you don't know if you're going to wake up in the morning. You hope you do. You hope you do, but and just to maximize enjoyment in life and to find the fun wherever you can. And that's what my dad tried to do. He was very working class. He ran an auto trim shop with his older brother. He was a middle child like me. I have 3 boys. And just he worked and worked and worked for his kids and didn't have a college education. And but he still managed to find the joy where he could. He was outgoing. He loved his glass of wine. I'll give you a funny story. Back before I went into recovery, after my dad and my mom separated. And so my dad lived across the street from me and we started going out together. Okay. And so we go into this bar in Dallas. And my dad, at that time, he was in his 70s. We walk in there, he gets his glass of wine, I get whatever. And before you know it, he has all these girls half his age and he's telling stories and he's swing dancing and he's jitterbugging, showing them how to jitterbug out in the dance floor while I'm sitting there, nursing my beer. And he's sweating and he's just having this great time. And that's how my dad was. He really was just so charismatic. And he came back to it's funny, he comes back to the bar and the girls come back with him and he says, "Oh, your dad is so cute." And one goes, "How old is he?" I go, "He's 72." And my dad didn't hear it. And they go back out and they come back. And my dad goes, "How old you tell him I was?" I said 72, like you are. And he got all mad. He said, "I told him I was 62. I said, "Dad, these are girls are 20 years old. Do you really think they care if you're 72 or 62?
Would it make a difference?
"Come on, Brian, you're busting my ass." That was my dad. He was just a character, and he lived life to enjoy it, and when he could, because he had his struggles. And so I try to do that to the best I can, and that has become much more relevant to me as I've gotten older. And there was a time in my life where that was just impossible. It was just impossible. I mean, at 18 years old, as a freshman at Penn State, I was dealing with 2 eating disorders, bulimia and exercise bulimia. At 21, I was an alcoholic. By 26, I was addicted to cocaine. By 44, my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric facility after a near suicide attempt. 3 failed marriages as a result of drugs and alcohol. Been arrested. So there weren't all these opportunities as I went through life while trying to practice law as well. Well, I went through life under a fog of depression and drug addiction and alcohol abuse. It wasn't a lot of fun. And so now that I have over 17 years in recovery, I try to use the lessons I learned during that time to maximize every moment and do the things that I find passionate, such as singing.
And part of I think that quote is, that you're the youngest you will be, right, moving forward.
Yeah.
But it's also putting everything else behind you and keep moving forward, keep living ahead versus living a life of regret of what the past was. You are who you are today, because of that. And you built resilience through that. You wouldn't be who you are today
That's right.
if you wouldn't have been there and done that.
And you bring up an interesting point, because I see all the time on LinkedIn and here and there, your past does not define you. Your past kind of does define you, right? It really does. Now, you don't want to allow your past to become who you are.
Right.
Moving forward, but your past does define you. And my past absolutely defines me and has absolutely made me more resilient and has given me in sobriety a much different outlook on life, especially as I've gotten older.
Brian, how close were you to potentially having your life extinguished by your addiction?
It was close, doctor. It was very close. In the summer of 2005, I really got to the point where I just saw a black hole in my future. I saw no hope. I saw nothing. I saw just an abyss. And my life was a continual cycle of cocaine, Xanax, and alcohol. I had lost all my clients. I really didn't have any way of supporting myself. And here's where enormous privilege comes in. And I would be disingenuous not to acknowledge the enormous privilege I've had in life because of my brothers and financial and a lot of, skin color and all types of different privilege. My brother was supporting me. Mark was supporting me because he didn't want to see me living under a bridge. But that, money doesn't make you happy. Money, if you're happy, money can increase that happiness and things like that. But if money does not make you happy in itself. And so I just decided I was a black stain on the Cuban name, that I had nothing to offer anyone in life, and I decided to end my life. I sent a disturbing email to a friend who got a hold of both of my brothers. Jeff came first to my house. Mark flew in from LA. Jeff came up to my bedroom, and I'm lying in bed. And I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand. There was cocaine everywhere. There was alcohol, bottles spread out. Jeff picked up the gun, took the gun, and Mark showed up. They cleaned up, and they dragged me kicking and screaming in my first 2 trips to a Dallas psychiatric facility. That's how close it was.
Did they save your life?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But the interesting thing is that even after that, I literally was kicking and screaming. They had to hold me in that car in the back seat. While they saved my life, all I wanted them was to get out of my life. I wasn't ready. I was not ready. And that's the thing about addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs. I had to be ready on my own. No one could make me ready. People can lay the path, but if I wasn't ready, and I've gone through this trying to help other people, right? You can talk, you can say, we can get you into this treatment center, we can do this, we can get you in a 12-step, but if they don't want it, you can't force them into it unless maybe they're a minor and you're a parent. But that, forced treatment has its issues too. So they take me down there, and we're sitting in the room with the psychiatrist, the psychiatric nurse, and my 2 brothers. And I'm screaming and blaming them, pointing my finger at them, blaming Mark, saying, this is all you don't know what it's like. You're famous, blah, blah, blah. Blaming everyone but myself, not taking responsibility for my own sense of self. And they just took it and they sat there. And it also occurred to me that I'm a lawyer, they were trying to put a psychiatric hold on me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. So my mind's starting to cycle through what are the laws in Texas? Well, I'm talking.
Wow.
And so I shift my tone. Okay, I'm not a danger to myself. I'm not a danger to others, blah, 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 blah. And said the things I needed to say. So the doctor, the psychiatrist had to say to Mark and Jeff, I can't sign off on it, right? He is my patient, not, I can't sign off on it. And so much to their chagrin, they couldn't put a hold on me. So we did what I call the Cuban rehab. They took me back to my house, they took my car keys, said, stay in your house for 2 weeks, sober up, and it'll all be okay. And that's not.
And coming up next, right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to hear the rest of the story. Ooh, I love a cliffhanger. Stay with us right here on the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away. More with Mark Cuban. Brian Cuban.
Happens all the time.
I've never done that before.
You're forgiven.
Wow.
You're forgiven.
I love you.
So the Cuban rehab, huh?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can't
the
wait to
Cuban
hear this
rehab.
one.
Me too. More when we're back.
Okay, so this next segment is 8 minutes,
Wow, I've
or
never
this is
done
the
that.
third 10-minute segment.
This is the third 10.
Third 10? Yes, sir. Who's bringing us in?
I'll bring us back.
Okay, I'll start the clock when you give the go.
All right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Before we went to break, Brian, you were going to explain the Cuban method of rehab. It sounded pretty dramatic, and I don't, well, did it work?
No. I mean, their method was that to take my car keys and, for me to seclude in my house for 2 weeks and dry out, right? That's not how addiction works. But my family was
Yeah.
trying to learn like anyone else. They didn't know. And to show you how resistant I was and how not ready I was, the moment they were gone, I got in a cab to a car dealership and got a new set of car keys. They weren't going to tell me what to do. And so what did I learn from that? What could I have learned from that? Well, I didn't say I'm going to residential treatment, rehab. I didn't say I'm going to 12-step. And for those who don't know, AA is the most well-known, but there are others. And it was none of those things. It was, I'm just going to bring the party to me. I had a drug dealer who delivered, and I'm going to distance from my family, right? Because now they know, now it's in their face. And that's what I did. And that went on until really Easter weekend 2007 when I hate the term rock bottom. I just hate it. I hit my recovery tipping point after a 2.5-day after a 2-day alcohol and drug induced blackout, where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, came home from a vacation. She had just moved in with me, came home from seeing her family out of town. And I had gone out that Friday when she left thinking I'd go out, have a good time and shower and be all, she'd never know. I was a liar. That's what I did in addiction, is lie. I had a JD in law, but I had a PhD in lying. And, but I blacked out, and I had a 2-day blackout. Next thing I know, it's Sunday evening. She's looking down at me. I look around. There's drugs everywhere. She didn't know anything about any of it. There's alcohol. And she's probably wondering if she walked in the right house. I'm trying to figure out what lie I can tell to explain this Law and Order episode orgy of evidence that I just might not be the person I represented myself to be.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was kind of a metaphorical running home to mama. I said, take me back to blank, and I named the psychiatric facility. You've been to a psychiatric facility? We'll talk about that later. I just need more time to think of a good lie to explain what there is only one explanation for. And that is how that went.
So you actively knew you were, I guess in your mind, did it register that you were doing something wrong? I read a part in your book when, was in 2006, the Mavericks were going into the championship, and you had some tickets that you were maybe going to sell on eBay.
That's the
but
insanity
didn't.
of addiction. Do we have time for that story?
Of course.
That's the insanity of addiction. So in 2006, the Mavericks were going to the NBA championship for the very first time. And my brother bought the team in 2000, and we had some success, but this was our first trip to the championship. We ended up losing. But as you might guess, I'm going to get some good seats, right? My brother owns the team. And so I called him up. I got 2 tickets. And then I also got a couple of tickets. I told him were for friends. You think I gave them to those friends? Nah. You're probably thinking I sold them on eBay for some astronomical amount, thinking like a lawyer. I didn't do that either, because that would have been disrespectful to Mark, to me, to myself. I took those 2 tickets and traded them to my cocaine dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Selling them on eBay was disrespectful, but selling them to my cocaine dealer was perfectly acceptable, right? How the mind works in addiction. My dealer shows up. I was high class. He delivered. I give him the tickets. He gives me this giant baggie of cocaine. I run up to my home office. I line it all out. I roll up a dollar bill. And cocaine users were kind of an ironic bunch, especially in pandemic times and coming out of a pandemic. You'll wash your hand, use the Purell, but we'll stick a dollar bill up our nose that has God knows what on it, and
Yep.
used by God knows who, and sniff.
Yep.
Go figure.
Oh my goodness.
Cocaine had long stopped giving me the feeling of self-love and self-acceptance,
Yeah.
just pain and shame and paranoia. I got all paranoid. I hid the cocaine. I drove to a home improvement store where I bought electrical faceplate outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drove back to my house, go to the drywall in the closets upstairs with the saw and the drill, and I create these fake electrical outlets. And I put the cocaine in smaller baggies and put it behind all these fake electrical outlets and sealed it with, with the faceplate, thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before.
Mm.
And so I did a little, I snorted a little more, and again, just bad highs and paranoia. And it was never an epiphany that I might have a problem. It was, maybe I need to change drug dealers. Maybe I need to switch out the Grey Goose for the Jack Daniels and get that right mixture. And so I hid the cocaine. I took the cocaine out of the hiding place because I was all paranoid again. And I went and I flushed it all down the toilet about an hour later. Now it's about $900 worth of cocaine. I wake up the next morning and I'm thinking, what? Wait a minute. You flushed all your stash down the toilet. There's another game tonight. You're an idiot. So I called up Mark. I got 2 more tickets. I called up my dealer again, rinse, wash, repeat. He comes to my house and he said, you did all that last night? I didn't want to tell him I flushed it down the toilet like a moron. I said, yes, give it all. And he gives it to me. And then I did the same thing. I tried it, bad high. I was just chasing this high that was never going to come again. And which is very common in cocaine addiction. And I hide the cocaine again. This time, about 2 hours later, I take it back out and I go back to that same bathroom and I flush it down the toilet for the second night in a row. Now, they say when Dallas flushes, it swirls downhill to Houston. So I think Houston had a little hop in their steps those 2 nights. The quote unquote insanity of addiction, doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting a result. But we know it's not insane. It's a biological, brain-based process that affects so many of us, our loved ones, ourselves, our children, our spouses, our colleagues. I mean, we've lost over, with the fentanyl fatal overdose epidemic, we've lost hundreds of thousands of kids. We're losing a generation.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, you mentioned a lot about self-love and self-awareness and a person having to be ready. And I know that Dr. John experiences this as much as I do on a daily basis when we're having to help patients who have these vascular disorders or cardiovascular disorders to change their addictions, to change their habits before. And you can lead that horse to water in a sense, but you can't make them drink, right?
It's hard, Kim.
And I'm curious, what was that point for you? What was that for you, that catalyst for you, where you finally said, you know what, I'm ready?
That's a great question.
You use that to help others to find their moment as well.
That moment, what I call my recovery tipping point, was standing in that parking lot of the psychiatric facility for the second time in my life with Amanda and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, standing there, and she's crying. And 3 things occurred to me. One, she was going to leave, and she didn't. She stood by me, and we dated for over a decade while I rebuilt the broken trust and found recovery. And now we've been together over 18 years. And 2, there wouldn't be a third trip back. I'd be dead. And 3, Kim, I thought about something my father would say to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up all the time. My father would say, guys, no matter what happens in life, no matter where you go, pick up that phone and call your brother. Tell your brother you love him. Ask your brother if there's anything you can do. My father was the middle of 3 boys like me. This was the gift that was passed down from their parents. And, they were very close. And he was passing down this gift of family, this gift of love. And that is a privilege as well, because especially around addiction, you have broken families, estranged families, you have incarceration, you have all of these things that, explode the nuclear family unit. And I realized that it was a privilege and I didn't want to lose my family. And I decided it was time.
Right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to hear what John's question is for Brian. So you don't want to miss that. Stay with us. Don't go away.
You
Clear.
you got me, Kim. You got me. Well, I mean, Brian, as I was listening, you, it's your family never gave up on you,
Never,
right?
never.
But
You want
you,
a 3, 2,
yeah,
1?
yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
And this is an 8-minute segment.
This is 8 minutes. Yeah, hold on.
That's a good follow-up.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing our conversation with Brian Cuban, and before we went to break, he was sharing how important the family is, and not only just in general, but it sounds like his family and his now wife, girlfriend at the time, saved his life. So, Brian, as we were talking, in my head, I was writing notes, and I said his family never gave up on him. Did you ever give up on your family, or did you ever give up on yourself?
I never gave up on my family. I was ashamed. I distanced from my family. That wasn't giving up. I distanced because I was ashamed.
Mhm.
And giving up on myself, I didn't know who I was, right? I had to break down Brian Cuban to that little boy who was bullied, physically assaulted over his weight, and all of this different trauma in my life. And I had to heal that little boy before I could figure out who Brian Cuban was sober. And you know what? When I decided I was going to go to 12-step, my family never gave up on me, but they knew it. They figured out that I had to do it. There was nothing they can do. All the money in the world can't get someone sober, right? And so when I decided I was going to go to 12-step, I texted Mark, and I texted Jeff and said, I'm going to 12-step. I'm 12-step meeting today. All I got back were one-word answers from each of them. Good. Good. They knew, right? There was nothing else to say. And when I finished the meeting, I texted them, my first one down. They said, "We're proud of you." That was it. That was all there was to say because they couldn't do it. And when I sat in that chair in my first 12-step meeting, I was crying and I was ashamed. And I didn't know what my future would look like. I was terrified. You know what I wanted more than anything else when I sat down for my first time? I remember specifically thinking that if sitting in this chair will allow me for the first time in my life to wake up, walk to the bathroom, birthday suit naked, look at myself and love myself without alcohol or cocaine, I would sit in that chair. And I sat and I I still sit. And I hit 17 years in recovery, April 8th of this year.
Amazing.
And Douglas has a question from Lumberton, Texas. Douglas, go ahead and ask your question for Brian Cuban.
Yes, sir. Are you still involved in meetings and sponsored?
Yes.
And
Yeah, I still go to 12-step meetings, and I do a lot of, during the pandemic, I really got into the virtual ones online. So I do those, and I still work with people, and I mentor people, boys and girls struggling with eating disorders and addiction. A lot of lawyers, just because it's important. Connection. And when I work with people, that helps me. That really helps me. So yes, I am still.
I'd like to call another caller, Marcia Burr. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Brian. It's always very heartening to me to hear another good recovery story. And I have so many thoughts swirling around my head. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with 12-step? My
Sure.
experience with it was like it was steps that I had to take, as you said. You can open the door, but you can't force a person
Absolutely. And I
through
think
it.
it's important to note that there are many paths to recovery. Thank you. That's a great question. There are many paths to recovery, and I chose 12. I was only given two options when I got sober, either treatment or 12-step. But there are many different paths to recovery now. There's smart recovery in many different ways. But for me, moving away from talking specifics about the big book and all those things, the connection in the room. I mean, I was going to 3 meetings a day And it's something that I actually cut a video on not too long ago. It's going from FOMO to JOMO, the fear of missing out to the joy of missing out. When I first got sober, I was awash in the fear of missing out, right? Because I felt totally alone. And what got me through that were the connections in the rooms. I was going to 3 meetings a day. So because even though, you delete your dealer's number, you trash all your beer bottles and all that, you know where the liquor store is. My dealer's number's in my head. And so that fear of missing out is always, especially early in recovery, early in sobriety, there's always that danger of being pulled back because you feel like you'll never experience joy again, a joy of a sober joy where you do things and you don't know what those activities are. And so you only know one, for me, I'll just speak for me, I only knew one way of life, which was partying. And so that was very important to me, the connections in the rooms.
I want to talk about your writing and the role that it's played in your therapy, and moving from defining yourself by your story to defining yourself by the new story that you're creating with so much success with creating fiction.
Well, that was an interesting journey. My first 2 books were about me, that were memoirs, eating disorders and addiction. Mm-hmm. And then it's funny, I had a dream one night and the dream just kept solidifying in my head. And it just occurred to me, wow, this is a good plot. And I just decided that I was going to write fiction and write my first novel. And it took me years because I knew how to write nonfiction, but fiction is a completely different art. And it took me a long time to learn how to do it properly. And The Ambulance Chaser, I was very proud of. And both these books are set in Pittsburgh because that's where I'm from. And, and I know the town. Maybe one day I'll set one in Dallas. But they both revolve around addiction, and The Body Brokers revolves around the fentanyl epidemic. And yes, there are aspects of me in these books, but it really has been just mind freeing to create characters, to create storylines, to not know what's going to happen when I start a book, how it's going to end. I don't know. And there's a thrill to that. And there's a thrill to pushing a story forward where I may not even know how the next chapter is going to go. I've really enjoyed it.
That's really interesting. So I've never written a book. I always assumed that, like, one of the 7 habits of highly effective people begin with the end in mind, but you don't have an end for the book?
No, I didn't have an end for The Body Brokers until I was maybe halfway through.
Really?
I had an idea of how it was going to end. But no, and some people outline their whole book, right? Mm-hmm. My mind just doesn't work best that way. But yeah, I enjoy the process of not necessarily knowing how conflict is going to work out, and what's going to happen to a certain character.
And what is your inspiration for these books and for the themes and the characters?
My knowledge of the recovery space. Because I stay very in tune in the recovery space. I am very involved with the, raising awareness and battling misinformation regarding fentanyl and the fatal overdose epidemic. And so I take all of that and I created a story of a person who finds his girlfriend dead of a fentanyl epidemic, and they're both in recovery. And he and her toxicologist roommate go on a journey to prove that she was actually murdered.
Wow. So these are loosely based on truth.
The second book, The Body Brokers, is definitely ripped from the headlines type thing.
Wow. I can't wait to read the book, but I also can't wait to see the movie, hopefully.
I've been able to draw on my knowledge, and I certainly know I'm not a toxicologist. We have a doctor here, but I do consider myself, I'm not a doctor, but I do consider myself informed. I read what toxicologists write. I read about whether you can actually overdose from passive fentanyl exposure by just being in the room. And, the doctor probably has some thoughts on that, but for another time. So I read about all these things and understand how the science actually works, the biology actually works, and that helps me create my storylines. And in the story journeys from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to ground zero of the fentanyl epidemic, Kensington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. Coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have some final thoughts from Brian Cuban and get some additional tips on building resilience so you can live better quality of life. So stay with us. Okie dokie.
Okie dokie. This is 4 minutes.
4 minutes. We have 4 minutes in this last segment, but
Okay.
Brian, do you mind sticking around for a few minutes? I'm getting lots of questions from people coming in.
No, not at all.
And I know that I think Marcia wanted to ask more, and Alan and Douglas. So
Sure.
if you wanted just for a few more minutes, but I just want to get through the last 4 minutes of the general radio show. We're still live on social media. Do you want to go through, is there anything more about the book? Because we should really plug the book, and then also your tips for building resilience.
Yes, and my tips for building resilience will come from my tips in singing. It basically,
Okay.
don't be afraid to let your voice crack.
Okay. John,
Let's do
go
it.
ahead.
Yep, ready? 4 minutes. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Wrapping up a fantastic show with Brian Cuban. So, again, with 4 minutes left, Brian, what are some tips and tricks for resilience? During the break, you mentioned it has something to do with your tips for singing.
That's right. I've been taking singing lessons for going on 2 years now, which is part of my journey to dealing with allowing myself to deal with vulnerability and allowing myself to be more vulnerable. But what I've learned from the singing process is that it is hard and there is failure, and your voice builds resilience like you can build resilience in yourself. The voice has to become more resilient over time. And one of the things my vocal coach pounds into me all the time is that you have to let your voice fail. You have to challenge the limits of your voice. Your voice is going to crack, your voice is going to screech. Otherwise, you become comfortable, stuck in the same place, and you never know what you're capable of. When I go on LinkedIn, Kim, and I see all the time, I just cringe. I see, the 7 habits of mentally strong people, right? These articles make me cringe, because does that mean if you don't do that, does that mean you're mentally weak, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing in my mind as mentally strong or mentally weak. There are only different levels of resilience. And people can become more resilient. And to do that, you have to, figure out where your weaknesses are and push it, and allow yourself to approach failure and figure out what you've learned from that. That's where resilience comes in. What did I learn? How can I implement that moving forward to take myself up to the next level, right? How am I going to hit that C5? Well, I have to fail at C5 and understand what I did wrong. And that's a singing, Kim understands, right? C5 on the scale is hard, especially for a baritone like me. So you have to understand, you have to hit it and fail. You have to understand why you failed, and you have to take a step back and build that base, and just incrementally move back up to it. That's resilience.
I love it. And so in our last minute here, we would just really appreciate your time, Brian. Everyone needs to go out, get to Amazon and pre-order The Body Brokers.
Yes, The Body Brokers is available for pre-orders. And while you won't get it till December, just pre-orders help me a lot, right? Because that's how they determine best-selling lists. And with Amazon pre-orders, if the price drops, your price will drop with it.
And make sure, along with ordering that, in the meantime, if you haven't read The Ambulance Chaser, that is a fantastic book. In fact, I'm going to take it and I'm going to read it again because I absolutely loved it. My dad has already read it twice, and he said that there were quite a few things that he wished he caught the first time, but now he's read it a second time and he's caught those little details. It's very, very detailed. You did a great job with it.
Thank you. And you can also go to authorbriancuban.com and enter your contact information. And it's just for my book stuff and stay up to date on my speaking tours, my release, and things like that.
Real quick, Brian, do you practice law anymore?
I have not practiced law. I'm close to 20 years now.
I see.
And I do not miss it.
I was going to say, do you miss it?
Nope. Amazingly, I still have my law license, but it wasn't for lack of trying to lose it.
On that note, thank you
done.
so much,
Well
Brian,
done.
for joining us. We really appreciate you, and congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Okay, so do you mind if we just in our
No,
after show
go
here?
ahead. Yeah,
I want to, you're always so gracious with your time. I don't want to take advantage, but we do have a few that are coming in here. I
absolutely.
think, Marcia, you wanted to come in with another question. You said you had a few on your mind. Do you want to jump in with another?
Well, not so much questions as just some thoughts hearing you speak, Brian, and talking about 12 steps, is that it occurs to me from my own experience with alcohol, you have to be ready. People can point you to the door, but I have to be the one willing to walk through it. And then the work is up to me. I've heard people say things in rooms like, oh, I got the gift of desperation. Well, honestly, that's not me. My ego will not allow me to be that desperate. I mean, I worked in an ER for almost a decade, so no desperation here. Don't let it show. And so I came up with the idea of the gift of resignation, that I just resign myself to doing the work and taking the steps, and then the steps become a manner of traveling through life. And I love hearing you speak. I love your variety of things that you're into. And it always thrills me to hear a good recovery story. So hats off for, what did you say, 17 years now?
17 plus years. Yes. Thank you. And
And
congrats
how
on
do
your
you,
recovery. That's wonderful.
I'm curious in those moments because life is a journey, as Marcia mentioned, and you're just traveling through it. Every single day can't be peaches and cream, right?
Absolutely not. I still
Would
suffer
you,
from clinical depression.
and how would you bring us back? How do you move through those moments? Because I know we have a couple people on here that are struggling with that.
Sure. Well, I take antidepressants, and whatever your view on that is, that's for me, that's worked. And then I meditate. I do the mindfulness in the shower we talked about, right? I call it clearing the mechanism, letting the shower wash out. And I stole that from The Love of the Game with Kevin Costner, clearing the mechanism. And I do things like that. And I have my exercise, and I have my singing, and I just try to stay busy and try it again. Like my dad said, you're as young as you'll ever be, and I try to put that into practice. But I do suffer from depressive bouts. I've been suicidal in sobriety, and it was a long time ago, and I had gone off my meds. But the life is definitely not all great.
And how do you cope with? You mentioned getting to C5. What if you can't get to C5?
I acknowledge that, and I keep practicing. I just practice. I acknowledge that it's a process, right? And it took me a long time to figure out that, life is a process, singing is a process. Just training for a marathon. I've run 8 marathons is a process. There are going to be bad days. There are going to be days where you run a little faster. There are going to be days where you hit the C5, and then the next day you can't even hit, C4, right? No, I can, but it's the incremental moving forward that you look for. It's not the day to day.
Yeah, agreed.
And we have a question from Marcia O. Marcia O, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Well, previously I had asked in the chat, and you kind of answered it. Now I forget what I was going to say. Oh yeah, if you think the struggle, like your addictions really were, the root cause was the other things. And then you just talked about how you still struggle with depression and from medication. So what was my last thing? Oh yeah. Do you think that those issues were the root cause of your addiction, or do you think that there are just addictive personalities and you wouldn't probably?
I mean, there may be, and again, addictive personalities. I don't think I'm qualified to talk about that. But speaking to my story, There was a lot of my
Right.
story we didn't talk about. There was a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I believe, as we know, there's a strong correlation between trauma and addiction, right? Cause is not correlation, but it does correlate. And so I believe a lot of my issues, body image issues, and things like that go back to childhood.
Okay. And those aren't things you can just fix or,
Yeah, I'm in
I mean,
therapy
there's
today.
things you
I'm
have
still
to
in therapy.
deal,
I've been in
cope
therapy
with.
for years.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Douglas, go ahead. Unmute.
Yeah, so oh man, a lot on my mind too. It's a very interesting topic. Ooh, lost my train of thought. But
No, you've been through, he's been through a lot. Do you mind if I speak a little about your background?
so
Or
as listening to you talk, it's like Alan and I were sharing this, a lot of flashback of listening to your story and understanding the addiction at a level. If you haven't been an addict, it's kind of hard to understand that thought about how you have a wife and kids, a family, and all you can think about is using. That's the insanity of the thought process.
Absolutely.
June 1st, 1983, I shot up, drank, and don't remember the last 19 days of my life till June 19th, 1983, when I woke up and said, I don't want to die like this, and been sober ever since.
Congratulations. That's wonderful.
And I use today what I used the first 180 days of the recovery program, still use it today, but I've learned so much more through this, through that. And I bring it, my toolbox is full, overloaded of tools that I can use today to deal with living life on life's terms.
Sure.
And that insanity to think that I would have done anything, I have done anything to get my last fix. And that's part of that insanity, thinking today, how do I not go back? I don't have a relapse. I don't. Sorry. If you hear about me relapsing, you might as well just put on a suit because you're going to a funeral. That's all there is to it. And that's part of that insanity of the addiction, is why knowing that if I have just a sip of beer today, that it's game on. Like, hello. That's the insanity thinking of the addiction, isn't it, Alan?
Yeah. Going to dinner the other night, I thought maybe I could just have a non-alcoholic beer, but I know what I'd be back on that curvy unicycle all over again and falling constantly.
Yeah,
So,
no, I always look at it and say, okay, what is the upside of this, right? How is my life going to be what's my life going to be like tomorrow, when it's over? And the answer is never better.
no, I just wanted to say thank you for some reaffirmations for me in my recovery, and it really helped. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And so much I mean, for all of you, of what, even Douglas and Alan have been through in overcoming that, being able to use, all the strength, that resilience that they built through that to get through additional challenges, especially with health later on. It's really played a very big role, hasn't it, Douglas, Alan?
Yes. I've been through 12 treatment centers, been in psychiatric twice. And I was listening to you talk about your brother. I was thinking about my dad. And about 19 years after staying clean and sober, I was at lunch with my dad one time. We were sitting in the truck and he leaned over and hugged me, and I didn't know how to behave because it took that long for us to start to develop a relationship again after all the things I put them through.
Yeah, understand.
And to understand that our family, in the addiction, we have to understand our family becomes sicker than we do sometimes.
Yeah,
Because they deal with all the stuff we won't deal with.
yes, I agree. I agree. I put my family through hell.
But they move
Well-
forward when you move forward, right? And it's
And they're
it's
thrilled to move
amazing.
forward.
Yep.
And you also have
and
to remember, though, in recovery, it takes them usually longer to recover than it does for us, because we're the ones going to meetings or doing the things that we have to do to change. And if they're not getting help, well, then it takes them a little longer to catch up where we are.
You're right. We're the ones that broke the trust.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of a funny short story. Is I'm a furniture maker, and I had a shop away from my house. I would go there every day and drink and do a little smoking and whatever. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was shaking and I had to leave work. And I've got work to do out in my shop that I'm doing for work. Yeah, right. And I was there till 2 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday. And I swear to God, it must have been sun. I turned the corner coming out, and there was a state trooper waiting for me. And he nabbed me for drunk driving under the influence, and lo and behold, man, I spent, I don't know, 20 hours in the county jail, along with a bunch of another drug dealers and all these other people. And it's like, wow. And I quit.
That's great.
Right there and then. So it took a shocker for me to really do it, because
I felt the
lost my
cold
family,
as well.
lost second marriage, and that's what it took. But got my family back after 8 or 9 years now, and my kids respect me again. So took a lot of work.
he just lives.
That's what
He
it
lives
takes.
now just to give me trouble.
Yes.
Somebody's got to do it.
I know,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well,
it's
it's interesting to me hearing these different stories, and life's become pretty simple to me, and I was one that could complicate a glass of water, thinking and analyzing so much, and always having my what ifs and my contingencies, and being on top of my game and not letting it show. And I've had 3 DUIs in my life, and the second one was in Fort Myers, Florida, back in 1989, and I actually flipped a Cadillac end over end and landed 5 feet away from a lake. And they had to cut me out with the jaws of life. I woke up in the ER, and I saw this nurse coming at me with a needle, and I knew what was coming. They were going to check my blood alcohol level. And I'm like, get away from me, cussing her out. And then a cop comes in, and I'm like, oh, I better chill. And that scared me sober for 12 years. Fear scared me sober. So I didn't really get to my recovery yet. I was kind of a rerun. And so then my mom died of cancer, and I didn't have the toolkit to deal with that. And again, don't let it show, be strong. I fell in love, opened up a photo business, blah, blah. And I was just going, running from myself. And working 3 jobs. I was an X-ray tech. I was working at a bookstore and running Clicks Photo, just running away from myself as fast as I could. And so I had this just innocuous thought one night driving home from work that, oh, I'll just get one of those little tiny airplane-sized bottles of little wine thing. And that's all it took. And 5 years later, I was way worse off than I was in the first 25 years of drinking. And even that didn't stop me. Then in 2010, I had a heart attack, a widowmaker heart attack brought on by drinking. And
Yeah,
I
Alan too.
survived it, and I came home from the ICU, and I continued to drink for 4 more months. And my wife, who was then not allowed to be my wife because of the law, she was my life partner, said, look, I'm going away for a few days and you have to make a decision because I can't live like this anymore. And so she went away, and I thought about it, and I decided that I loved her more than I loved booze. And so I went to AA again. And that's when I really got what the first step is acceptance. I think there's actually a step before the first step, which is called awareness. And that's where we hit a bottom or we hit a low point that snaps us out of it to a point where we have to look at ourselves more honestly and do some reckoning. And so it's funny to me that I started off saying I'm going to quit because I love my wife more than booze. But at the end of the day, I did it for me.
Yeah, and I think that that's
Because
so
I did it.
important.
Yeah,
It's so
because I did
important.
it for me, then I
Yep.
can now share it out to others. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. And so Brian, it is that you know, you can't with that again, you can lead that horse to water, you can't make them drink. And you have to be ready to be ready to be ready to be ready. And you know, you can apply that to so many different types of addictions. And we deal a lot with I know Dr. John deals with it as well with the cigarettes and trying to get people to eat better and give up 70 years of bad eating habits. And we even had someone in the group today that was like, I've had my limb is on the line, but I know that if I keep smoking, I'm going to lose my limb, but I'm still going to keep smoking. And you know, people were coming to me saying, she's not going to quit, she's not worth helping, you know, this and that. And you know, the thing is, one, you can't give up on people, but two, um, you don't know what's going to trigger that. You can't scare people enough into doing it or to giving up these addictions. And so I'm just curious from your standpoint, you know, just can you help people understand again what it takes to overcome, you know, an addiction for people so that you know they don't come down on others, because you can't come down on other people for the addiction. It's not easy to come out of it once you're in.
I'm not sure where I'm not. No, it's not. And I mean, I personally never try to tell anyone what their path should be. What I do is try to tell them what's worked for me. Uh, you know, show them, you know, where, you know, if they're interested in 12 step, you know, show them where to go online. And if they're interested, you know, in another recovery mode, help them with there. Just I try hard to learn the past, the different roads.
Yeah.
I never try to push someone down anyone, you know, and I just try to be that connection, right? Because it's connectivity is really the heart of recovery.
Here's a good question
Yep.
for everybody.
Actually, you know
Cameron?
what, Douglas, I have to let Brian go. I'm so sorry. His time is up. We'll get to that in just a moment, but Brian has to take off. I want to read you one, you know, thought that came in from YouTube. You know, Peggy says, thank you for inspiring words, your real life experiences. And she says she definitely will be buying a copy of your book. I think
It's nice
so
to
many
hear.
will.
Thank you.
We
Me
really,
too.
really appreciate you so much, Brian.
No, it
Thank
was
you for
my
joining
honor
us.
and pleasure. And thank you everyone for allowing me to share, and congrats on everyone's recovery one day at a time.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Brian. We really
Bye-bye.
appreciate it.
Vessel intervention, because I think it was during the intervention.
So, Douglas, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I was confused too, because, well, I guess we're gonna have to take it to the three of us.
Douglas.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but he had
No,
sent me a note
you're
saying
fine.
he had to
You're
go,
fine.
so I didn't mean to cut you off.
It was
Because
cool.
I get, yeah, maybe I was confused about the non-target thing because there was embolization, but was it related?
I am
Yeah,
going
I'm not
to
sure how they.
mute. And so Douglas, go ahead, ask your question.
I was just, how many of us in here had a drink because the sun came up? How many of us had a drink because we were happy, we were sad, we got lonely, or we did this, or this happened, or that happened? We've all done it, haven't we? Addiction, I spent 30 years as a drug and alcohol counselor at Jefferson County Probation. I've seen all sides of it. So, I mean, it starts, addiction is a habit. Same way with smoking, it's a habit. And it's hard to break that habit. And there's something, my dad was a drinker most of his life. Woke up one day and said, I'm done, never drink again. Like, why couldn't I do that? Well, I just wasn't that lucky, I guess. But it's a habit. You do the same thing over and over with a feeling or an emotion. And so I have a feeling. And when I feel that, if I don't want to feel that, I'm gonna have a drink. If I get used to that, every time I have that feeling, the first thing I'm gonna think about is drinking. And then before I know it, that feeling overtakes, or the thought about having a drink overtakes that feeling. And that's when the addiction starts.
I think there's something to be said about habits and environmental influences on addiction. We get in rote, we get in these autopilot routines, and there are comfort zones. And so addiction is tricky because we have to be stepping outside of our comfort zones.
Well,
and recognizing that
when we
first,
become,
like you said, the fear of
what?
not first you were talking about the fear of, I forget the little term you used, but first it was a fear of it, and then, you know, the joy. And so we flip this thing on its head, and it's become simple to me. Instead of like fearing that drink, like I never want to forget where I came from, but today I look at it and go, it's really simple for me. I just don't ever have the first drink. I just don't ever have the first sip. And it's a non-issue at that point, because, you know, you have that first drink and it changes your brain chemistry. And then 5 million drinks isn't enough. So I just don't have the first drink, and I just don't even think about it anymore.
And that's what the program teaches us, is that in recovery, it teaches us to deal with all the things we didn't deal with beforehand. But we have to remember, in the addiction, when we're in our addiction, before I stopped using, I got used to living in that addiction. I got used to the insanity. It became comfortable. It's what I knew. So if that's smoking is the same thing. How many people have heard that term, don't talk to me till I had my first cup of coffee? You know, smoking, after a while, I used to wake up, and the only thing that my brain automatically thought about smoking before I even thought about sitting up, probably. But addiction is the same thing. I got so used to living in that insanity that that's what's comfortable for me. And the fear was to change, being something different, living a different way. I didn't know how to live a happy, normal, whatever normal is, life. I knew how to live. I knew how daily how to deal with the insanity that I created.
Yeah. And the fear at first is like, God, how am I going to live without this? And so we have to get out of our comfort zone a little bit to break the cycle. And, I've heard it said in many meetings, do 90 meetings in 90 days. And there's something to that scientifically, because our brains are capable of rewiring and hitting different receptors in 90 days, unless actually it's been studied even further, and it can be done in like 3 weeks.
I was raised the old fashioned way. We did 100 out when I first walked down the fellowship here in Beaumont. He told me I had to do 180 meetings in 180 days. If I missed one meeting, it didn't mean I was serious about my recovery and I needed to find another sponsor. So the thought about that process is it didn't give me time to sit at home one day and go back to that old thinking behavior, that old thinking style. I had to keep moving forward. And moving forward was calling my sponsor, doing all the things that at that time the program taught me to do. And it worked. It worked for me. It worked for me now. Okay, that's just me. But I went to 180 meetings in 180 days, and I didn't have time to slip into those old behaviors or those old habits as an addict. And that's what worked for me. And when I sponsor people today, that's what I still do today. So I have to, you're right, it's getting out of that thought process when we're depressed. Talk about PAD, and when we get depressed, think about building off. Do we get up and walk, or do we draw, or do we color? Do we do something different? The longer I sit in my insanity, the more it takes over. I have to get out of that insanity, whatever that looked like, so it changes that thought process.
I love that you brought it to Pat. I was going to actually ask you exactly that. The process for recovery, how do you apply that to being able to stall progression of your PAD or manage the chronic mental impact of this debilitating disease, and just persevere and do what you need to do?
One step at a time. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's so true. I wake up in the morning, I say thank you, I get in gratitude, and I go about my day. I create my day. Thoughts really do become things. The next time you feel anxious or sad or mad or ashamed or depressed or in pain, stop yourself and ask yourself, what was I thinking about before I started feeling this way? And you'll be amazed if you do some analyzing on it. You'll trace it back to what you were thinking and go, oh, wow. So then I can just change my thought. Change your thought. It'll change your feeling.
What do you do, Alan?
For me, I kind of thought of my addiction, and still do, as a toddler, because my actions were always destructive, kind of like destroy the toys instead of doing something constructive. And I don't know, it's kind of, it's funny the way I think about it, but for me, it's waking up every morning to do something constructive instead of destructive.
Good for you.
My addiction is, hearing Marsha is, and trying to go back the times that I would quit for 2-3 days and then jump back into that destructive path. And that's why I call it my toddler phase, because I would jump back and forth, and then learning to grow up and accept the responsibility for those actions and where it got me.
So is there a time period? Do you think there's a time period? I can remember when I first got diagnosed it was hard then to do what I do now. So I guess I had to learn along that process how to get out of that. For me, I can't walk. Do I need to walk to the end of the trailer? Just to change that thinking.
I think one thing that addicts learn in recovery is patience. And with this disease and a recovery from it, whether you have an amputation, you have constant surgeries, is the recovery periods to get to a period of where you can lead life again. For me, anyway.
It's that one extra step. So how do we get people with PAD to understand that, yes, this is how we live today. This is what my life looks like today, but it doesn't have to be that way tomorrow. I have to do something different today to change that. Yeah. And that's the part where he was right about having to take on that responsibility. I have to be responsible for that. And I can't sit on this couch. And if I sit on the couch and feel sorry for myself, I'm not going to build collateral. I'm not going to learn to eat better. I'm not going to quit smoking. I won't quit drinking because that's where I'm sitting. I have to change that behavior and become responsible for that. But it's hard to do sometimes, isn't it? How many times, three of us, you and Alan, are sitting here, do we still have those days that we still feel kind of, oh shit, screw this crap, you know? I don't want to walk to the end of the block today. I'm tired. My leg hurts. I don't feel good. You know, like I'd rather just sit here right now and do nothing and feel sorry for myself or whatever you're thinking.
But like you say, Douglas, you still need to allow yourself to go through that because it's still part of the recovery. You still need to allow yourself those emotions, whether it's you being lazy or getting up and doing your woodworking.
I still have to be a human. I'm still a human being. I'm still going to have bad days where the it comes out of my mouth, where but I have to. So when I call my sponsor today, I still have the same sponsor for the last 18 years now. When I call him today, sometimes I tell him I'm in a bad mood. And he goes, all right, you need time. We have this thing. He goes, you have 10 minutes. And I'm allowed 10 minutes to say anything about anybody with no regrets. None. Some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth sometimes about all kinds of people, it just goes, it's dangerous. And then I can hear him on the other line. All right, Doug, stop. Your 10 minutes is up. Now what are we going to do different?
That's a good one.
And I have to be accountable for those moments that I'm pissed off at the world. I can't deny that because I'm still a human being. It's what I do with it that changes what happens today when I have those moments.